we have two journalists in conversation with each other next. Peter Wolodarski, who is the editor of DN, in conversation with Maggie Haberman, who is the White House correspondent for the New York Times. And I guess we're ready, so please welcome them both. Thank you.
Hello, everyone, and hello, Maggie.
Hi, Peter. It's a hard act to follow.
I guess there is a meta meaning to all of this.
Exactly.
We're extremely privileged and honored that you're here today because everyone who's following American politics has to follow you because you are the one reporter that is really the Trump reporter, who you are following him all the time, writing about him, getting interviews. You have an extremely hectic schedule. Do you sleep anything?
I don't, and I have not slept much since I got here. But Trump has a habit of dominating everybody's life in U.S. politics, and certainly for White House reporters. So it has been a very, very busy year.
But you came here.
But I came here. Well, it was a wonderful break, so thank you.
Is this your first trip to Europe since he became president?
It is. It's my second trip to Europe since he became president. I flew with him on Air Force One to France in July because he wanted to attend the Bastille Day parade, which was literally a 2-day trip to France, and then he went back. So.
How do you manage this? I mean, you have 3 kids, small kids. You live in New York, and you cover the president who's in Washington. How do you deal with this?
I mean, it's been a tough year, and I had anticipated that things would end when the campaign ended because I didn't think that he was likely to be the president, even though I did think he had a chance of winning. And so obviously things have changed. You manage, you do the best you can. It's been the hardest on my kids, and I think that the election in the U.S. was very intense for children, I think, in a way that, for school children, in a way that people didn't really understand at the time. But Trump, as I said before, he just sort of fills the room and sucks up all the oxygen. I mean, that filters down to everything. So it's difficult, but the thing about being in New York is that he's a president who tries to act as if he's not actually in the White House. I was just watching his rally on a live stream from last night in Pensacola, Florida, and it was as if he was a candidate again. I mean, he kept talking about the rigged system, and
he's in charge.
And he's in charge. He leads this system. So I think what he's going to try to do is make himself the fixer of the system based on some of what he was talking about at the rally. But it works well to not be in Washington for this presidency.
And he wakes up very early in the morning, right?
Probably around now in the U.S. It's about 6 a.m.
And now it's
6 a.m.
6 a.m.
Yeah.
Okay, and how does a typical morning look for the president? You have a story right now out at the New York Times.
Not out yet. It's coming out in the next couple of hours.
About his habits, right?
It's about who he is. It was originally supposed to be timed around the 1-year anniversary of the election, but it has taken on a different form in terms of the timing. But it's about what his day is like, what his Twitter habits, his TV habits. He's extremely sensitive to people characterizing how much time he spends watching TV, which, if you read his Twitter feed, is pretty obvious because he tweets at Fox News and he quotes things he's just heard, and you can often look at what time a segment just aired and then see he'll tweet about it a few minutes later. But when you take note of that, he gets very upset. So he's probably watching television.
So he's going to attack you on Twitter in an hour or two because of this story?
When the story goes up, I don't think it'll be up in 2 hours, but there's a good 50% chance he will make his feelings known on Twitter about the story.
How does that feel for you when you're personally attacked by the President of the United States?
So he has not done that to me personally since he became president, but he did during the campaign quite a bit. It's unusual because the way it's almost like cyberbullying, the way he uses his Twitter feed. He goes after you, and then his swarm of followers come at you. And then long after he's moved on to some new grievance, they still carry his grudges. So it's, on the other hand, it's simply a more intense version of the types of letters we used to get in the mail in a newsroom. But it comes with a certain level of vitriol that I've never seen before.
Has it changed you?
I don't know if it's changed me. I mean, I think it's, what I worry about is that I'm getting a little numb to certain things. And it's taken a very long time for me to get numb. But a lot of what we're seeing with Trump is so incredibly, it's more than unusual. I mean, some of the language that he uses is, it's beyond divisive rhetoric. Some of it's very dangerous, and especially on certain topics. And so I think there's a difference between people being surprised by what he does and people being outraged by what he does. I don't think people should be surprised by what he does anymore at this point. He's shown that there's not much of a bottom to what he's going to do. In terms of it changing me, I just think that I've gotten inured to it to a degree that, that has surprised me. That's the one area I'm surprised, is that I've actually gotten numb to some of it. But I don't think it's changed me. I mean, I think, I'm pretty cynical about politicians in the first place.
And you're one of the few reporters that have actually been covering Trump, not only for this last year and the campaign, but for the last
several years. So
10 years, right?
Well,
you were in New York covering him as a reporter for the tabloids?
As a tabloid reporter, you cover Donald Trump in some way or another, but I didn't really get to cover him intensively until 2011 when he was considering running for president. And it looked a lot like it did in 2015, but that time he didn't run. And because he didn't run, one of his aides came to me in May of 2015 and said, Trump is going to announce his candidacy on June 16th of 2015. It was a few months later. And we want you to write about it. And I said, no. And he said, why? And I said, because I'm not writing a word until he actually runs. I don't believe he will run. And I had good reason not to believe he would run. He had been flirting with running for president since 1987. And we all believed he wouldn't actually do it because he would have to release his tax returns. He would have to, make more clear about his actual net worth, which has been the subject of some speculation that he might be overstating it. He still hasn't released his tax returns, so it turns out I was wrong about that.
But you've seen him a lot more than other journalists, closely. I mean, you've interviewed him many, many times,
Yeah.
you met him. How is he on a personal level?
I mean, it depends. It depends. It's, he does have this ability to be funny and charming that you don't see when he's standing at a rally, talking about the rigged system. But usually the conversation, I always feel like he's selling, I mean, he's a salesman and he is always selling. So he's trying to sell me on some picture of what he wants reality to be. He never treats life as if it is filled with objective truths. It's truths as he wants it to be. And one of the challenging things for me, certainly, but I think for all reporters, is that to cover Donald Trump accurately, in his mind, is covering him unfairly. And that's, it arouses these reactions in him that don't seem rational.
But he seems to respect you.
No, I don't think he respects me. I think he deals with me. I think that everything with him is, he's the most transactional person I have ever met in my life.
What do you mean by that?
I mean, everything is a deal. Everything is about what his objective is. And so his objective is, he's fascinated. The Times looms very large in his personal psychology.
The New York Times.
The New York Times.
Why is that?
Because when he was growing up in New York and he wanted to be taken seriously. I mean, there's this whole lifelong thread of wanting to be taken seriously. And so he was a real estate developer in Queens, and he did not have glitzy projects on Fifth Avenue at that point. He wanted to be taken seriously, and the New York Times represents a cross-section of New York elites that he wanted to be part of. And when he, getting the New York Times' respectful treatment in his mind is a big focal point. The New York Times is the first interview that he did after he was elected, and he came to our offices. We didn't go to him. So that, I think, tells you a lot.
And where is
But that's why he deals with me. I mean, if I were not at the Times, I do not. Yes, he's known me a long time, but if I were not at the Times, I don't think I would hear. I
read somewhere that you enjoy interacting with him.
I don't know that I said I enjoy interacting with him. I think what I said is that I can find, that's okay. I can find him charming and engaging, which, as I was saying, you don't normally see when he's in these public forums. but I do find him interesting, and I mean, he's as a reporter, he is a fascinating character, and one can be both fascinated and still vigilant and aware of how divisive and in some cases dangerous what he says
and
does.
This has moved from just being a story for Americans. This is a global story now, and there's a war of words between the president and the North Korean regime, the leader of North Korea. Where will that end?
I hope somewhere not terribly. Look, I think that the president's rhetoric has alarmed a number of people within his administration who have spent some time trying to get him to do less of that. There are some members of his circle who actually have a more muscular view of how the U.S. should be dealing with North Korea that might surprise people. But generally speaking, you know, the hope is that this ends with words and nothing more, but he is certainly engaging in activities we're not used to.
But given all that you know about him, how would you think he would react when a foreign leader insults him, attacks him verbally?
Well, he takes it personally, and he doesn't let it. He takes everything personally. Everything. He completely conflates himself with the institutions he represents. It is very, you know, the state is me, and so if he is insulted, he will tend to be impulsive and reactive. He is constantly reactive. That is the hallmark of this presidency. That doesn't portend anything great in the context of your question, but I also don't want to predict where it might go.
So should we brace for impact?
I think you should just take everything one day at a time, as we all are.
Maggie Haberman, thank you very much indeed for doing this interview.
Thank you.
And
Thanks
we'll have the conversation later on. Thank you.
Great, thank you.